Coming up on today's video, crucial injury updates from all 20 Premier League teams, including Solanke and Pedro Porro news, what to do with Solanke, Quanza, Barco, and many more players. Should you play the triple captain chip this week? And much, much more. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and this is your weekly FPL roundup for Gameweek 2. Okay, let's start off with all of the team news, and we're going to go fixture by fixture, starting off with that early kickoff between Brighton and Manchester United. So Minter is going to be available for Game Week 2 following concussion regulations. It turns out he fits within the regulation time, and he is available to play this weekend. So a nice result there to have him back in the Brighton starting lineup. Barco is joining Sevilla on loan, so he is going to be leaving the club, meaning he is no longer useful as a 4 million defender. We're going to talk a little bit about him more in a short while, and we'll look at some potential replacements for him as well. João Pedro's minutes might also be in question now, with Rutter and Gruder signing for Brighton over the past week. So just be aware of that one. Moving forward, João Pedro may see reduced minutes each game week. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to happen. He's probably fine in the short term, but just one to be aware of as we move forward. For Manchester United, Sancho is going to return following an ear infection that he apparently had in game week 1. Lindelof is out with a toe injury, and Shaw, Yoro, Højlund and Malacia remain out. For Crystal Palace, it seems they're selling a few players. Anderson and Ayew are not going to be in the squad for their fixture against West Ham, as they are on the verge of transfers out of the club. And Hughes and Franca are injured, and that's going to be a continual thing for Franca. Hughes obviously picking up an injury as well. For West Ham, Alvarez presumably still out. It was actually kind of difficult to get any definitive quotes from Lopetegui. I feel like he could be one of those managers who keeps his cards close to his chest throughout the season. Regarding injuries, he said wait and see when pressed, so no real news there from West Ham. For Fulham, Sander Berge is not ready for a start yet, having just signed for Fulham, but they have got a clean bill of health otherwise. Fulham, as always, the medical department absolutely smashing it. They never have any injuries, do they? And for Leicester, Vardy was surprisingly back last game week, so I wonder if there was some, I don't know, some mistruths in the opening game week's press conferences. Skip is available after signing from Spurs, very available apparently, and Cody and Daka remain out for the Foxes. For Manchester City, Rodri is still unavailable for Game Week 2. Savinho, on the other hand, has partially trained, so there's going to be a late assessment on him, having been injured in that first game. It's possible that he plays. I think it's probably still pretty unlikely. Bob is, of course, expected back all the way in December. It's going to be a while for him. And Ipswich, their oppositions, well, Burns picked up an injury, Broadhead, Clark and Muric remain out. I think Muric is probably the closest, and Phillips is ineligible to face his parent club, Man City. We should see Calvin Phillips, however, come into play from Game Week 3 for Ipswich. For Southampton, Matías Fernandes and Ogachukwu have signed for the club, so they are going to hopefully be involved in some games moving forward. Bazunu, Lallana, Larios Stewart and Sulemana are still not ready, however, for Southampton's fixture against Forest. And for Forest, Aina and Alanga have slight issues, apparently, from last game week, picking up those injuries, but they actually could be available, so no rush to sell these players yet. There's still a good chance that they could play. Of course, if you've got some bench cover, it might be worth just benching these players for one game week only. Milenkovic is now available to start following a suspension that he carried over from his time at Fiorentina. Didn't actually know about that before, didn't understand how that worked, but apparently he's going to be back for this game week too. And Danilo is set for surgery. He's had quite a significant injury. He's going to be out for months. For Spurs, this is the big one. Solanke has been ruled out of at least Game Week 2 with an ankle injury. He could be out all the way until the international break, which would mean that he misses Game Week 3 as well against Newcastle. So just be aware of that, Solanke owners. It might be time to sell him, and we're going to go through some Solanke replacement players just in one moment's time. Don't worry, we've got you covered with the Solanke replacements, but it looks like he is going to be a player to sell this game week as long as you don't have any other issues in your squad. Pedro Porro is fine and available to play, so good news there for Pedro Porro owners, picking up the goal in Game Week 1, and now he's available for Game Week 2 as well. Winners, chicken dinners. Bissouma is back in contention as well, having fallen out with the establishment due to naughty behaviour, but Bentancur is out, so Bissouma maybe comes in from Bentancur in Game Week 2. For Everton, Tarkowski picked up a hamstring injury, so is a doubt. Young has been suspended as of last game week. He's going to be suspended for this game week only. And Branthwaite, Chamiti, Coleman, Garner and Patterson are still all out. So still some significant problems at the back in particular for Everton whilst they await getting a lot of their players back into fitness. For Aston Villa, cash is going to be available after an injury concern. Mings and Kamara are those long-term absentees. They're going to be out for quite a while still. And for Arsenal, not really too much news outside of the left-back position, really. So Zinchenko was complimented for his performance in Game Week 1, so presumably he's going to start again. Timber is almost ready, but maybe not quite there. And Tomiyasu and Tierney still out as well. So we do expect Zinchenko to probably play ahead of the likes of Calafiori and Timber in Game Week 2. So not quite time to talk about those other Arsenal defenders. You've got to stick with your White, Raya, Saliba, Gabriel for now, I think, because everything else is a little bit uncertain longer term. For Bournemouth, Adam Brooks and Enes Unal are still out. Senesi, however, is likely to be back, and Evan Nilsson is expected to play some minutes for Bournemouth. He is the new Bournemouth striker that they've signed, and yeah, it's going to take maybe a week to get him fully up to speed with the Bournemouth tactics, but he might play some minutes in Game Week 2, despite having only just signed. And for Newcastle, Fabian Schär is suspended for 2 game weeks. Wilson is still out with a back injury, and Trippier apparently didn't start last game week due to a lack of training, but he has trained more now. He's been in training for 2 weeks now, so is presumably going to be more available to play. Of course, there's still a lot of transfer speculation around Trippier, but Eddie Howe seemed surprised about that speculation. I know Eddie Howe isn't always the most honest manager, but, you know, he seems surprised by that speculation, and apparently, you know, Trippier, professional guy, is going to be, you know, making himself available to play every game week, regardless of any speculation. Whether he actually will play is another question, but just in case you do have Livramento in your team, just be aware that there is a chance that Trippier gets some game time. He has not moved club quite yet. For Wolves, Cunha is now ready to start, having picked up some minutes in Game Week 1. Semedo is still suspended. And then for Chelsea, few little bits of news here. Palmer felt something in his hamstring in yesterday's Conference League qualifying game that Chelsea played, but is hopefully going to be available, according to Maresca. I wonder if Palmer might see reduced minutes against Wolves if he does play. But obviously, very important player for Chelsea. If he's available, he will more than likely start. Sanchez has been confirmed as the starting goalkeeper moving forward for Chelsea, and Neto, having played in yesterday's Conference League game, is unlikely to start in Game Week 2, apparently. There were some other players who played in that game, and Nkunku played around 57, 58 minutes in that game, but I think he should be absolutely fine to start in Game Week 2. Neto was kind of singled out as someone who's maybe, you know, not going to play too many minutes right away, only just signed for the club, obviously has a history of injury issues there as well, so Chelsea probably not looking to push him too much, but just be aware of Palmer. That's the big news on Chelsea. For Liverpool, it goes from bad to worse for Quanza owners. Obviously, he got substituted at half-time and his performance questioned by manager Arne Slot. But apparently, on Tuesday, he missed... on Tuesday, he picks up a little minor injury, missed training on Wednesday. Not sure if he managed to train on Thursday or not, but, there is some questions around whether he is going to be available for Game Week 2. You do have to worry if this is the manager protecting a young player, though. Saying there's a minor injury where in reality, there's maybe not a plan to play Quanza in Game Week 2, but he doesn't want to knock the player's confidence, which is totally understandable. But I think at this point, we can probably say with a reasonable amount of confidence that Quanza is not going to start in Game Week 2, and it will be Konate taking his place in the Liverpool lineup. But apparently no other injury issues in the squad, so in general, good news from the Liverpool camp. For Brentford, their oppositions, Ben Mee is back. He played a minute or two in Game Week 1, didn't he? So he's going to be back and available. Tony, mystery around Tony. Thomas Frank basically said that Tony could be involved. He could not be involved. I don't really know what that means. Hopefully, someone can decipher that. it's probably just Frank skirting around the issue whilst there is transfer speculation around Tony. I'm not expecting Tony to play. Certainly wouldn't be a player I'd be picking for FPL. And Henry and Hickey, presumably, they are still out. No comment on them. They've obviously had issues for a little while now. Maybe they can come back into the team over the next few weeks. I don't think either of them are too far away. And before we go any further, make sure you have liked the video if you are finding all of this information useful, and do subscribe as well if you're new around here and you want to get this roundup of all of the FPL information every single Friday. So just going through my predictions for the game week 2 results, I think it could be a draw between Brighton and Manchester United. Crystal Palace should have enough to do one over on West Ham, even though they started in a bit of a disappointing way. I would imagine Fulham will do well at home against Leicester, so I'm backing them. Of course, Manchester City are going to beat Ipswich. I don't think anyone has any doubts around that one. Southampton and Forest, I think, could be a tight one, so I'm actually going to put that down as a draw. Spurs, I think, even though they are missing Solanke, just because Everton have so many issues in defence, whether that be through injury or suspension, I think Spurs should beat Everton. I'm going to back Arsenal to beat Aston Villa. Maybe a little bit of bias on my part as an Arsenal fan, but, you know, I think they definitely have the powers to do it. Between Bournemouth and Newcastle, I think this is going to be tighter than people imagine, but Newcastle will be very keen to get some more points on the board after a difficult game in game week 1, and they still managed to come through it. The last 2 games are Wolves versus Chelsea. Chelsea, it hasn't quite clicked yet for them necessarily, but they're showing some promise still. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they produce against a Wolves team that I don't think are going to be too impressive this season in general. And Liverpool at home, at Anfield, of course they're beating Brentford. It's got to be done. All of those score predictions were made on the Sleeper app. Yes, the Sleeper app is a new fantasy game where you can predict results and win big prizes by joining my league. So if you think you can predict the results better than me or better than anyone else, you've got that crystal ball ready, then join the league. Completely free to join. The app is already used by millions of people. This is a big fantasy platform, and yeah, we're giving away big prizes. So link at the top of the description if you want to join my predictor league to see how we get on in game week 2. Okay, let's talk about Barco. Should you be selling him? I think in general the answer is no, because Barco's price is actually going to be locked at 4 million once his transfer is confirmed via the FPL app/website, because once a player has moved, they can't go up or down in price anymore. So he's going to be locked at 4 million. You're not going to lose value on him as long as he doesn't drop in price before that transfer move is secured. I would keep him if you can't just bench him, and you know, if you can play your other defenders, just leave Barco on your bench. I think that's going to be absolutely fine. There's no problem with just leaving a 4 million defender on your bench. That's kind of what they're there for. The only way I would sell Barco is if for some reason you were depending on him and relying on him for this game week or for future game weeks. Hopefully, for most of you, 99.9% of you, that is not going to be the case, and therefore just leave him on your bench. It is so easy if you have other playing players. Quanza is a slightly different situation. So obviously, if you haven't sold Quanza already, he has now dropped in price to 4.4 million, meaning that if you still have him, your only direct replacements are going to be 4 million defenders, unless you have money in the bank. Now, I would probably keep him if you have another nailed defender on your bench. You can just leave him on your bench. You can't really get anything for 4.4, well, 4.1 to 4.4 anyway at the moment. So any replacement you bring in is not going to be super useful anyway. And I do think there's still a chance that he starts again in the near future. Maybe not game week 2, but he will get some minutes at some point or another. So he might just be worth keeping at this point if you don't, if you have missed that price drop, basically. But I would consider selling if you have no other bench cover. You could either upgrade to a 4.5 if you have the money in the bank. Otherwise, choose a safe 4 million defender who can just pick you up even 2 points per week. It's going to be much better than 0 points if you have literally no other bench defender options. You know, if you've got like a Ben Johnson, for example, on your bench, you've got Barco on your bench, and you have these big problems, maybe then it might be worth just getting a body in your FPL team. So we're going to have a look at those options for these cheap 4 million million defenders next if you do need to replace Barco or Quanza. And I've basically split these into two categories. You've got your safe and reliable picks that aren't going to cause you any issues. These players should be nailed throughout the entire season as long as there's no injuries. And they are basically those cheap, they're cheap centre-backs from newly promoted teams. So Harwood Bellis and Bednarak from Southampton. We've got Fass from Leicester. And we've got Greaves, a marauding centre-back from Ipswich Town as well. If you do want to go a little bit risky, Mosquera is another 4 million defender playing for Wolves. He started game week 1 and looked an interesting player. He could get some more game time, really cheap way into maybe a slightly better defence in Wolves. And we've got a Sepp van den Berg, which is a really interesting one. He's just signed for Brentford, and if he gets regular game time for Brentford, he could be the 4 million defender to go for. You might be able to turn a disadvantage from Quanza and Barco into an advantage. However, I'm not sure how much game time Van den Berg is going to get, particularly in the short term, which is why he is a much riskier pick for those defensive replacements at that 4 million price tag. If you have Solanke, he pretty much needs to be replaced. The only reason I wouldn't replace Solanke is if you've already used a transfer, for example. Would I take a -4 to remove Solanke? No, I would not, particularly if I had a playing player on the bench. Even if you've got like a Harwood Bellis on the bench, a Rodgers who plays against Arsenal on the bench, something like that. If you've got these players, you're probably okay to just keep Solanke in your team, unless you have a free transfer to use. If you have a free transfer, yeah, you replace him, even if you do have cover on the bench. And my top replacement is really Muniz. Great fixtures from here on from Fulham. Leicester at home, followed by Ipswich away, followed by West Ham at home. Really nice fixtures. We've got all of the predicted points on screen as well for you guys, so you can have a good idea of how many points we're expecting these players to score based on the data. Mateta is also up there as one of the top picks for predicted points. He costs 7.5 million though, so a little bit more than Muniz. We've got João Pedro there, potentially, although minutes may come into question soon. And if you're happy to go for Wissa, despite the difficult fixtures, kind of knowing that the fixtures will get better eventually, then you can maybe go a little bit earlier on a player like Wissa. But I definitely think there are some advantages to going for a Muniz, a João Pedro, or a Wissa, because that's going to free up a little bit of money in your bank. And if you are able to free up the money, you can maybe actually next game week afford to upgrade Quanza or upgrade Barco to another defender who might work quite well. So freeing up the money might be a good idea with Muniz, João Pedro, or Wissa. There are some slightly riskier options that you might consider going for. So Armstrong for Southampton looked pretty good in game week 1. He's a penalty taker as well, which is always useful. Cunha is probably a little bit premature. The fixtures aren't quite there yet, but certainly, Chelsea at home, Newcastle at home, they're not the worst fixtures in the world. Maybe Cunha and Wolves can get something out of these games. And we know that Cunha is a brilliant player. So if you fancy going for something a little bit different, then maybe he's your guy. Just 2% owned at time of recording. Also, Chris Wood. I'm a little bit worried about him longer term with our knee back fit. Nketiah rumoured to be signing for Forest. But certainly over the next couple of game weeks, Southampton in game week 2, Wolves in game week 3, if Wood continues to start, then that's going to be good for you, and he's going to get you FPL points. My question is, does he become a minutes risk a little bit later on? And that's very, very possible. But if you want to take that risk, then go for it. And finally, Xerxes. Do we think after his goal in game week 1, he's going to be starting for Manchester United? I guess that's a possibility. I think he's probably not a super safe player to go for, but if for whatever reason you are really confident on Xerxes, then he could be a player you go for. But I certainly do prefer Muniz really as a first priority replacement for Solanke. So some people have been asking about selling Nkunku. He's another player who I don't think I would sell. Now, Nkunku was substituted before 60 minutes in game week 1, which worried some people. Also, Chelsea have signed a lot of attackers, most recently Jota, João Felix. It's worrying for Nkunku owners, right? But I think in general I would keep him. If you are happy to be patient and not judge him on one tough game week against Manchester City, remember, we shouldn't really be judging players based on their performances against Man City. It's a really tough fixture, but if you're not judging him on that, you probably keep him. And if you have another playing attacker on your bench, if you've got a Rodgers on your bench at the moment, then if everything goes wrong with Nkunku over the next few game weeks, you have Rodgers ready to come on, substitute in. Just as an example, if you've got anyone else, João Pedro, Smith Rowe, whoever, cheap other guy on your bench, then they can come in and help you out if Nkunku goes wrong. So you don't need to worry as much about Nkunku. The only way I would sell Nkunku is if I had literally no patience and I just wanted to make a really aggressive transfer for another player that I genuinely really want. So if there is another player who costs around or less than Nkunku, who you just desperately want in your team, that is the only reason I would sell Nkunku, because the next fixture is against Wolves. I think it's a good fixture. I would like to see Chelsea set up against an easier opposition in Wolves, compared to City. There is a gulf in quality there. I think Nkunku, he is not a left winger. I can't see him playing there regularly from now on. He will play more centrally from here on, and I think we'll get very different results from him in easier fixtures where he's playing in preferred positions. And if Cole Palmer turns out to be injured, well, guess who's on penalties? It's Nkunku. So I think there's actually a lot of advantages to keeping him, but at the same time, if you are worried, I don't want to say don't sell him. There is going to be scenarios and people out there who are desperate to do so. If that's you, go for it. But for me, he's a keep. So I wanted to have a look at predicted points for Game Week 2 so we can kind of consider captaincy for this week. Absolutely no surprises to see Erling Haaland against Ipswich Town top of this list. But how about Mo Salah against Brentford as well? He could be a pretty interesting one if you don't have Haaland for whatever reason. Third place is actually Eberechi Eze against West Ham. A little surprising to see him as the third highest predicted points for Game Week 2. And De Bruyne as a fourth choice option there as well against Ipswich. Of course, the predicted points model working really well so far. The predictor, the best possible predicted points team from Game Week 1 scored 90 points in Game Week 1. So they do know what they're doing. It's all just taken from, the stats and all of the information we have and put through an algorithm to kind of produce some predictions. So it does work, guys. And if you would like to check out predicted points or the My Team tool from Fantasy Football Hub, you can still get 50% off if you use the link in the description. So go check that out if you want to see more of this stuff. But the big question is, are we going to triple captain Haaland? Okay, so there are pros and cons to triple captaining Haaland, and we're going to go through that and as well as a little bit more information as well. So first of all, this is a good opportunity to triple captain Haaland because it's likely to be there's only likely to be one big double game week this season and one smaller one. So this is not like previous seasons where we had multiple big double game weeks. We only are going to have one big one. And to make matters even more interesting, we've got less double game weeks, but we've got more chips this season to use in double game week. So we've got that mystery chip. We still don't know what it is, but if we have two double game weeks this season, for example, you might want to bench boost on the bigger one. You might want to use the mystery chip on the smaller one. And if there's no other double game weeks, well, you're going to have to use your triple captain chip on a single game week anyway. And on paper, this is the best fixture of the entire season. Haaland at home against Ipswich. So if you are going to go for a single game week triple captain, this is probably a pretty good time to do it. We know Haaland right now is fit, he's available, and he's unlikely to be rested as Man City are not competing in any other competitions at the moment. And the predicted points model that we just spoke about now rates this game week for Haaland as the best single captain opportunity of the entire season. By predictive points, this is your best opportunity of the season in single game weeks. So if that all tells you, well, I want to captain someone on a single game week, well, this is definitely an option for you. However, there are some cons. So we could get some additional unpredictable double game weeks. You never know when a game is going to be called off for, reasons you don't necessarily expect. Weather, safety, stuff like that, unexplained events, UFOs going over the ground. Things happen in football, and we do often see the odd game postponed that we couldn't possibly predict. And if that's the case, it's going to produce additional mini double game weeks, and maybe you can capitalize on one of those with a triple captain. We actually don't have much data on newly promoted teams either. It's only been one game week. It could be that Ipswich are actually a really quite tough defense to break down. We don't really have enough data to go by. We've only had the Liverpool game so far for Ipswich, and it feels a little harsh to judge Ipswich on that one. The mystery chip may be useless for double game weeks. It could be, we don't know what it's going to be. So it could be a chip that actually doesn't really benefit you in a double game week. The mystery chip may be more suited to a single game week. And if that's the case, well, another double game week just opened up for a potential triple captain chip, right? And also, there's just going to be other opportunities. This is not going to be the only opportunity to triple captain. Even for single game weeks, there will be other decent single game weeks to triple captain Haaland, and we're going to have a look at them now. So if you don't want to triple captain Haaland in game week 2, using the information that we have right now, these are our future opportunities. So in game week 9, Haaland plays Southampton at home. In game week 18, Salah plays Leicester at home. Then Salah plays Ipswich at home in 23 and Southampton at home in 28. Of course, you could consider captaining Salah as well. And in game week 30, Haaland plays against Leicester. So presuming you want to triple captain Haaland or Salah at home against a newly promoted team, well, we've got 5 more opportunities between game week 9 and 30. You don't even have to wait too long for Haaland against Southampton if that's where you wanted to go. So plenty of other opportunities, even in single game weeks. We also are expecting some double game weeks later on in the season, game week 33 and game week 36. I would imagine one of them would be the best week to bench boost. The other one, we don't really know yet. Could be a week to mystery chip, could be a week to free hit, but it also could be a week to triple captain as well. We don't know yet because it is so far in the future, and holding on to your chip, your triple captain chip, and just waiting for more information might be the play. You know, there's other opportunities. And of course, like I said, we could have other random double game weeks that we never saw coming. It happens every year. So maybe it will be like a Solanke triple captain like last season. Maybe it'll be someone interesting and like Haaland or Salah. Unlikely. Maybe it'll be like, you know, triple captain a Saka if he gets a random double game week. You don't know what's going to happen. And holding on to your chip and waiting for more information is definitely a viable option that I think I'm probably going to do. Wait for more info. You never know when the next big opportunity is going to be. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with playing a triple captain chip this week either. You know, it just depends. Do you prefer to be patient and wait for more information? Or are you just going to say, look, I can only play what's in front of me. Let's just go for it. Both of those kind of ways of playing are totally valid. And finally, this is my Game Week 2 Dream Team prediction. We did this in Game Week 1 as kind of my own personal scout selection for the week, and it worked out really well. My best possible 11 for Game Week 1 using the 100 million budget scored 92 points in Game Week 1. So we're going to do it again. This is my preferred team for Game Week 2. This is like my dream perfect team. So if your team looks something like this for Game Week 2, I think you're going to be in a really, really solid position, a really good position. And that is Henderson in goal, Trent, Gvardiol and Robinson in defence. In midfield, we've got Eze, Saka, Jota, Foden and Brereton Diaz. And up front, Haaland and Muniz. If you can, you know, transfer some of these players in, or, you know, you can get your team close to this, you're going to be in such a sick position for Game Week 2. I think this could be a big one for you. Guys, of course, this is all done on the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool. It's given this a team rating of 97% and a Game Week rating of 95% with 70.6 predicted points. If you want to start to build your own dream teams or kind of see how your team looks in terms of rating, again, that link is going to be in the description for 50% off your Fantasy Football Hub deal for a limited time only. Well, that's it from me today. We'll be back tomorrow for a deadline stream. I'll see you then. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later, mates.